Hello, Mr. May. This is Jack Ray speaking. I have to address you formally as I don't know your first name, and to the best of my knowledge, we have not met. But the reason I'm able to put this personal message to you on this tape is that my friend John Leach, who took the video photographs, always very prudently leaves 2 minutes of blank tape before the program starts. This has rather worried one or two of the earlier purchasers of the tape, thinking that their VCR had broken down. So it does give me an opportunity of sending you my personal greetings and the hope that you'll find something in this tape to enjoy. It's a very long program, Mr. May, and what I have done is to split it up into chapters, as it were, as we move from one section to another. And these divisions are marked by the appearance of maps, diagrams, and other explanatory matter. And this might be a good place to break off and come back on another day. It's a little bit indigestible to take all in one go. Well, now, in a moment or two, the titles will appear, and then the program will start with one of the latest acquisitions, my Midland compound coming out of Hedgehill Tunnel. Well, my greetings to you, Mr. May, and anybody who may be watching with you, family, friends, fellow enthusiasts, whatever. To those who loved them, steam engines were beautiful machines, and the whole railway scene in the days of steam inspired writers and poets and painters. It's little wonder then that men have sought to recreate this scene in miniature. And what you ought to see is just one man's interpretation of railways as I remember them, centred roughly around the 1920s, 30s and 40s. I do not seek to produce super detailed models, but rather to evoke the atmosphere of the period. So the scenery is as important as the trains themselves. We're starting this story at the northern terminus of Ravensmoor, and what we're watching is a train of empty stock being taken to platform 2. It's coming off the carriage sidings at the moment. On the end of this train is what is known as a PMV, a parcels and mail van, a vehicle of Southern Railway origin which in fact found its way all over the railway system of the British Isles. This van will be seen on its many and varied duties during the course of this programme, and it must be remembered that the programme will span many typical working days. For the benefit of those who didn't see Crewchester video 1, I think a word or two of explanation about the route of the line. This map shows how the main line starts in the north at Ravensmoor, where we've had a brief glimpse, down through Hartwich, with its 2 stations, Wilson Street and Central, then to Crewchester Junction, which we saw very briefly in the introduction, and from Crewchester there is a branch to the east coast at Trenton, and then southwards to Rockhill. Rockhill is about 40 or 50 miles north of London, and that's the end of our line, but we do presume that the line continues on to London City Road. That link line round to the west of London is purely imaginary, and it is the connection between the Crewchester system and the North and South Junction Railway of Eddie Bye, who lives on the Kent coast. Much more about him later. This bit of surrealist art translates what you've just seen into the layout itself, which is held within the confines of a small back garden. The northernmost station, Ravensmoor, is in the top left-hand corner, and you'll see how the line goes southwards from left to right to the bottom of the garden where the 2 Hartwich stations lie, Wilson Street on the main line and Central on the branch. The line then comes up the other side of the garden to Crewchester Junction. The branch line continues to the left to the town of Trenton and Port Trenton. Crewchester East lies on the 3rd leg of the triangle, and then the line goes on, as it were, like a spring, coiled in on itself, to reach Rockhill, which is at the south end of the line. Well, here is a detailed track diagram of the northern terminus, Ravensmoor, where the story proper starts. And you'll see that it comprises 4 passenger platforms, a 4-road loco shed, 2 carriage sidings, and a 3-road goods yard. If you go to the left, you'll see there's a loco spur, and then a link line, which we'll tell you more about later, and then the line carries on southwards to Hartwich. This is the large building that dominates Ravensmoor, and you're looking at it from the railway side. This is the other side of that building, Queen Street, that gives the station its name, and the main entrance to the station is through that porchway halfway along. This little scene is typical of the 1920s, a group of ex-servicemen singing in the street for pennies, and a 1914-18 soldier with his kit bag lighting a woodbine, I've no doubt. Another busy scene near the entrance with the news vendors. I don't know when this painter's going to finish his job. He's been at this stage now for months. This is the circulating area, the station concourse. Well, now I want to put the clock back a few minutes to that empty stock train with the PMV, which you're going to see from a new angle. We're standing on the circulating area, looking down platforms 2 and 3. You'll remember that the other train we saw arrive after that stock had been shunted was an LNER Express, and we'll get a view of that from the circulating area while we're still here. Well, we've now gone over to what I suppose you could call as the suburban side of the station, and we're looking down towards the engine sheds and along platform 4, and we're expecting a suburban train in all stations from Hartwich. I thought you might like to have a look at the cab and its detail in one of the station pilots. It's a little half-cab 060 called the Walter Mayhew, after an old friend of the railway. Well, you can see the N7 standing on the loco spur waiting to take the suburban train on its return trip, and that's what we're going to see next. But we're back now at the mainline part of the station, and we shall see that suburban train leave a little later. Meanwhile, the empty stock of the express has got to be taken out by the station pilot. The train in platform 2 with the PMV will be leaving soon, and the Black 5 is coming on to the end of it. All movements at a busy terminus, of course, are careful and slow. The drama of high-speed expresses will come a little later when we get to intermediate stations. There is a logical procedure with these departures. The express has gone first, followed by the stopping passenger train, and then the last of the departures will be a slow pick-up goods. It'll be a little while now before a train comes in the other direction, an arrival that is, but meanwhile the station staff are going to be busy disposing of the engines that we've already seen. And you can see the B12 over on the head shunt now. We'll just see that go to sheds. Ravensmoor Flying Club are out in force today. You'll remember the LNER local that came into platform 4? Well, Its engine is still up by the buffers, and that's now got to find a path to sheds. Parcels train, express parcels. It's nearly time now for the most important run of the day, the up non-stop Northerner Express. And we'll see the A2 Pacific Edward Thompson leave sheds. Here's the J39 with a very short goods from Harwich Central, and it's coming to an adverse signal. You'll see that this splitting signal is showing the left arm at clear, which means the goods train is going round the loop to Crewchester East and Port Trenton. train of coal empties for Ravensmoor from the south. Let's go and have a word with the crew. You're a long way from home, driver. I shift and sat in a cool. I never thought a Healing engine had come to this. Well, it's time now to make a move. We've seen just about everything at Ravensmoor, and on the map you'll see that the next station southwards is Hartwich, and that's the section we're going to next. Well, once again, translating that to the layout itself, you'll see Ravensmoor in the top left-hand corner, and we're going to move to the right from there, down to the bottom of the garden, where you'll find Hartwich with its two stations, Wilson Street on the main line and Central on the branch. Well, here's a detailed track layout diagram. Start in the bottom left-hand corner of the diagram, Highmoor Tunnel. We've come from Ravensmoor. There's a disused goods siding to the right, and then Wilson Street Junction with the branch going round to Central with its island platform and goods sidings, but the main line goes into Wilson Street Station with its two through lines and a bay at the south end. Here's our first glimpse of Hartwich Wilson Street looking along the main line northwards, and we're going to see the up norther coming through, today hauled by a B12. Well, about 20 minutes have passed, and a stopping passenger train, all stations from Crewchester, is just running down towards Hartwich Wilson Street. We happen to have arrived during one of those peaks of passenger activity. The LMS counterpart of the Northerner is the Moorlander, and here comes the Down Moorlander Express. We are now at the north end of Hartwich Wilson Street Station, and you can see the local train in platform 2, which will be leaving shortly. Meanwhile, coming up the branch from Central Station is a short train of vans. He's held at the signal until the local train has departed. Now the daily pickup for Crewchester and Rockhill is coming, and it has to pick up a couple of tankers here. Now the train has been divided and the front portion is going into the platform. These tankers have got to be put into the pickup train. Someone's done a nasty bit of rough shunting here. You'll remember the train with the PMV on the back? Well, here it comes. The PMV has been detached from this train, and you'll see in a few minutes what happens to that. Meanwhile, the train continues on its way to Crewchester. In the background you can see the branch train engine running round its train. Very occasionally a steam rail car works into Hartwich Wilson Street, and we're lucky we've caught one this morning. The greybeards amongst you will remember that this is not a diesel, it is a steam train. Coal from the north. Well, I think you've seen just about every possible movement at Hartwich, and now we're moving to the nerve centre of the line, which, as you will see, has a branch line going down to the east coast. On the layout diagram, you'll see Crewchester at the bottom of the picture. You'll see there's a triangle there, with the branch going off down to the east coast to Trenton Town and Port Trenton, and the main line curving inwards and going on to Rockhill and London. And then there is that third side to the triangle with Crewchester East Station. That provides a spur from Trenton onto the main line southwards, and it also provides facilities for turning locos. Very useful. Finally, here is a detailed layout diagram, and you'll see that the line from Hartwich comes in from the right through Greystone Cutting. The line then divides into three, with two routes through to the branch, platforms 1 and 2, and two routes to the main line, 2 and 3, with loco shed and goods sidings. We're now at Crewchester Junction Station, and we're moving from north to south along the length of the station until we look into Hedge Hill Tunnel. All stations from Rockhill. The push-pull shuttle service from Trenton Town. And here comes the train with the PMV. The Claude is now going off to be turned and go to sheds, and then the empty stock will be taken to the carriage cleaning department. the familiar PMV is being taken to the siding. The precursor tank is now running round its train before going back all stations to Rockhill. The Claude is on its way to Sheds, but first of all it's being turned on the triangle. All stations to Rockhill, this train. The Down Moorlander Express has been held at an adverse signal about a mile up the line, and she's just picking up speed again. As a contrast, the J50 is going to take a little tankers train off down to Hartwich, and it's shunting in Crewchester Junction, Goodyard. What's happening here is we've got one of these gaps when the slower moving goods trains pass through the section. The Highland Castle has come in with a perishable and livestock train, and the signalman has held it at the signal because a coal train is coming up from the north, and until he knows that is under control, he's got to hold this one. Well, here's the reason why the perishable and livestock train was held up. Here's the coal train held at the up signal. This non-fitted goods train is allowed to come through the station at cautionary speed as far as the advanced starter. The signalman has now brought the coal train to a stand at the up advanced starter, and he's assured that both these trains are fully under control. Now he can pull off for the down livestock train. A train of coal empties returning to the Ravensmoor coalfields. We've seen a stopping passenger train come up from Hartwich into platform 2. The push-pulls come down from the branch, and now a train from London is coming into platform 3. The B12 will come off and it'll be replaced by a Claude. Some viewers may be surprised to see the engine in the middle of the train. As it is push-pull fitted, it's perfectly legitimate for the engine to be there, provided the driver is in the front driving compartment of that leading carriage, as he is. B12 is on its way to sheds. I'll have a word with the driver and see whether we can go up on the footplate. Well, here we are back to the map, and we finished at Crewchester Junction, and we're going on to the southernmost part of the railway, which is Rockhill section. But we're not going there direct. We're going into Trenton Town, and then from Trenton Town to Rockhill round the third leg of the triangle. I'll show that more clearly in a moment. We've been at Crewchester at the bottom of the diagram, and we're going directly left into Trenton Town, and then from Trenton Town round through where the E is, indicating East Station. This shows the layout of Trenton Town, which we shall be visiting very briefly. The push-pull train, which we saw leaving Crewchester Junction, will go into the bay at the top of your picture. And then we shall see a rather unusual train leaving platform 2. Eventually we shall arrive at Rockhill, which is as far as the line goes in the garden, and we shall be coming from the bottom left-hand corner of this diagram where it says to Crewchester, through Hedge Hill Tunnel, and then round past the goods and loco department and into Rockhill High Street Station. That has 4 roads. 2 of them are bays, but the centre 2 roads are supposed to go on to London. You'll notice it also says to Stonemouth, and that I will explain with another diagram. This map shows how just south of Rockhill High Street Station there is another station which is called Rockhill Exchange, and then the loop goes round to the west of London through Buckinghamshire and down through Surrey and Sussex to the Kent coast of Stonemouth. I'm not sure whether it's Kent or Sussex, but it's down on the south coast. And a little later in the programme we shall be taking you down there through Ketchworth and Ledsham and Sandrock to Stonemouth Town. And here comes the push-pull into Trenton Town. The train in platform 2 is for Rockhill High Street, but it carries at the rear a through coach to the North and South Junction Railway, Stonemouth. And we've arrived at Rock Hill, and Rock Hill is a right old mess. The station is being rebuilt, as you can see, with the workmen on the roof. This is slack time at Rock Hill, and for 20 minutes after that train departed not much happened until a short pickup goods train arrived from the north. Platform 1 at Rockhill is used for passenger trains, but it's principally a hedge hunt for goods. Now here's something that will either amuse you or amaze you. Middleton Top's got nothing on this. Well now, here's a complete change of scene. We've gone back to Ravensmoor because there is a special which is leaving Ravensmoor on an excursion right the way through to Stonemouth on the south coast. Lord failed with a hot box at Hartwich and has had to be replaced by the B12. Well, the train has now reached Rockhill Exchange and is entering North and South Junction Railway Metals, and a little later in the programme we shall see it on its way to Stonemouth and arriving there. And so all stations to Stonemouth town. Just for a few minutes we've come back to Rockhill High Street and Edward Thompson, which is coming on an express, is to be turned. We're now on the North and South Junction Railway metals, and we're down at Stonemouth Town on the south coast, which is the destination for the through workings from Crewchester. Unfortunately, the train with the through coach has run into trouble and the through coach has had to be taken off at Ketchworth, but we'll come to that in due course. This is Stonemouth Town Station. A stopping train for Stonemouth Town from Leacham. Empty stop to sidings. The electric train leaving for the Willow End branch. This van's train has come from Rockhill and now has to be transferred to platform 1. Has gone outside the town and is now going to set back onto its train. We've now got to pull the signal off for the train to leave. We've just gone back to Jubilee Road because it's some time before anything happens at Stonemouth, and the electric set is on its way down to Stonemouth. Arrival at Leach. This is the train from Rockhill arriving at Ledgham High Street. Two things have happened. The headlamps have been exchanged at Ketchworth for the discs used on this line, and the through coach has had to be taken off through a fault. The train from Trenton and Rockhill is now leaving Ledgham on its way to Stonemouth. And here's the train from Rockhill approaching Stonemouth. The train from Trenton and Rockhill has now arrived at Stonemouth, and we see the electric set come down from the Willow End branch. It's just leaving Jubilee Road. This goods train is coming down to Stonemouth from Ketchworth, and it will then go back up the Willow End branch with empty wagons and coal for Willow End. This is the engine, the E6X. I know it is because Eddie told me. He's going to take the goods train up to Willow End. Well, what we're going to see now is the departure from Stonemouth town of the return trip to Rockhill and Port Trenton. But this time, Eddie Bye has found for us the old through coach which is added to the train to take passengers on to Trenton beyond Rockhill. This is the push-pull set coming into Stonemouth. You'll remember that excursion train running through from Ravensmoor? Well, here it is on the last stage of its journey, approaching Stonemouth. What we're going to see here is the final sequence at Stonemouth, and that is the pilot coming on to the Ports Express set, a mainline train that connects the south coast port of Stonemouth with Port Trenton on the east coast. The engine to take the Ports Express is one of the beautiful T9 engines. Well, a few minutes ago you saw the stopping train with the through coach, which will call at intermediate stations to Rockhill, but now we're going to see the Ports Express, which is Crewchester Junction and Port Trenton only. Now, once again, for the last time, and very briefly, I want to go back to the map so that you can see the course of the Ports Express from Stonemouth on the south coast, round the west of London, to Rockhill, up to Crewchester, and then down the branch to Trenton on the east coast. And again, very briefly, here is a detailed route that the train takes from Stonemouth, Sandrock, Ledsham, Ketchworth, Rockhill. This diagram will help you understand what you've just been looking at. This is the layout of Stonemouth town, and I think perhaps you'll be able to see what the movements are that you've been watching down at Stonemouth. You'll see the branch to Willow End up in the top left hand corner, and the main line going off to the left round to Sandrock and then to Ledgham, which in fact is in the other side of the same shed as Stonemouth town. And here comes the Ports Express through Rockhill High Street at a cautionary speed because of the severe curve. The Ports Express has arrived at platform 2 at Crewchester Junction. Here, the Southern Railway loco will come off and go to Sheds as a guest of Crewchester Sheds for servicing before the return journey, and a Crewchester engine will come on the other end to take it down the branch. While the Ports Express is travelling down the branch, the compound is coming into Crewchester Junction with a terminating express. As you see, we're back at Rock Hill High Street for the final sequence of this story. And that excursion train that went down to Stonemouth is on its way back. Fortunately, the Claude has been repaired and that will be hauling the return trip. Cautionary speed through Rock Hill because of the curves. While that LNER train is making its way to Hartwich, we're having a look at a local train in Crewchester East, bound for Rock Hill. And so we end this story where we started it, at Ravensmoor, Queen Street, with the LNER excursion back from Stonemouth. I'd like to tell you something about the Crewchester Model Railway. It started in Essex in 1951 in a back garden. The second layout was in Ipswich in 1953. At that time it was entirely clockwork. A succession of layouts followed until in 1982 I transferred everything, modified it to two-rail, got rid of many of the 56 engines that I had, and Barry Walls came to my rescue by converting the engines to two-rail. I'd like to show you very briefly some of my toys. First of all, when I went two-rail, I adopted this motor, the small JH motor with Muffet gears, 25 to 1. The controller I chose was the ECM comp speed modified to 2 amps, and it is switched. It must be remembered that this is perhaps not suitable for very heavy duty, but all my coaches run on PTFE bearings, so the engines are virtually running light. Now let me show you some of the engines, starting with this beauty. This is the Midland Compound, and the model was built by Alan Hardwick of Chesterfield. It was a present from my brother on my 70th birthday. What a brother. The originals were introduced to the Midland Railway by Johnson in 1902, and the species was continued by the London, Midland and Scottish well into post-grouping days. But this is one of the original 7-foot driver engines. Now the next engine I want to show you is one of the very handsome Great Eastern Claude Hamilton. These were introduced about the turn of the century by S.D. Holden, and the first one was called Claude Hamilton after the chairman of the Great Eastern Railway. This engine was scratch built for me by Eddie Bye, of whom you've heard quite a lot. It is one of the 2 Royal Claudes which were kept in immaculate condition throughout their life, so that they could take the Royal train to Sandringham at a moment's notice. It has inside working valve gear. The A2/3 engine was introduced round about 1946-47 by Edward Thompson. Not the happiest of characters, because he worked for a long time in the shadow of Gresley. But this was one of his versions of the Pacific, with the cylinder set well back. The model was built in 1958 by George Hinchcliffe, whom most of you will know, and it is in fact the biggest express engine that we have on the Crewchester line. Now here's another of my favourites, and we've gone back to the Great Eastern Railway and Holden, who introduced these engines in the early part of this century, and they were one of his great success stories. Even in Scotland, on the heavily graded lines and the sharp curves of the Highland railways, these engines distinguished themselves. I knew them, of course, on the Liverpool Street, Ipswich, Norwich line, Great Eastern. This, in fact, was the first attempt by a member of the Gainsborough Model Railway Club Alan Hipkin to build a Gauge O engine, and it was clockwork, so the boiler was too high and the tender was too low. Eddie Bye took it away with him for a year. He put a new boiler and boiler mountings, he lowered the cab. Derek Featherstone put some new wheels on the tender for me, and there she is, a great favourite, the B12 stroke 3. Oh, now here's a pretty little thing. I shouldn't really call this a C12 because that was the LNER name for it. These were introduced about the same time, towards the end of the last century. 10 of them were built for Yorkshire, and then they were introduced to London suburban traffic, where they were moderately successful. The first one had a fixed pony, not very successful. I'm afraid this one has, and is not so successful for the same reason, but I've kept this in Great Northern livery. While staying with tanks, here we have George Wales' precursor tank. These were built for express local work, out of London, even Rugby to Euston sort of thing. And this is a Bassett Loeb model, very much modified by Bob Lovell. And I might say at this point that all these engines, which were originally clockwork, were turned to two-rail by Barry Walls, who did something like 12 or 13 engines in the space of a year for me. He fitted cab details and brake gear. 442 tanks. Here's a well-known one. I always think of this as the true Tilbury tank rather than the Stanier 264 tanks, the three-cylinder version built for the London, Tilbury and Southend. This was designed by Whiteleg, and there were many modifications of it during its life on the line from Fenchurch Street to Shoebury-Ness. And at peak hours, these engines would be hauling 12 and 13 coach trains. The model was built by a Suffolk farmer, Frank Friend, in 1956, converted to two-rail by Barry Walls. Well, here is the well-known Stanier 264 tank, which was a development of the Derby 1927 design. The model was what Bassett Loeb were pleased to call a deluxe model, but this was re-wheeled back in the 1960s by the late John Hart, and then Barry Walls fitted the present Balshurt's valve gear and two-railed it for me. These pretty little 044 tanks are rather misnamed. They're always known as Stanier tanks. Stanier did not design them. They were developments of the Johnson engines, but Stanier was CME and he took delivery of these. There were 10 of them. This one, as you can see, is push-pull fitted. And I've cheated here, because in LMS days it should have had a stovepipe chimney, but I've put the later 1946 Stanier chimney. This engine mainly works on the push-pull train between Trenton Town and Crewchester Junction. Now, here's a little bit of model railway history. First of all, the engine itself is a J3, one of a batch of 15 delivered by Ibert to the Great Northern Railway, the M&GN section. But I call it a bit of model railway history because this was built back in the late 1920s by the Reverend Parley, the rector of Tivichel St Mary in Norfolk, who had a vast clockwork layout. It's overscale, but he's the gentleman who was always getting into trouble from his bishop for playing trains when he should have been preparing sermons or visiting his flock. But there it is, two-railed by Barry Walls, who's put the cab detail in from memory and two-railed it for me. J3. Now here's another popular class, Gresley's J39. In 1926, when he was Chief Mechanical Engineer, he started on a scheme of standardization. This was to be an all-purpose engine, and very successful it was, lasting right up to the end of BR days. This model's rather interesting. Those of you who are old enough to remember the Conway Model Railway of Harrow, one of their members sold this to me, and that must have stopped running on the Conway somewhere around about 1958, 30 years ago. Bassett Loke model, and again two-railed by Barry, who again did all that sort of stuff in the cab. J39. I wonder if there's anybody who doesn't know the Fowler Class 4F. The original 060 engines were introduced in 1911 to the Midland Railway, and although they did a lot of other work on the railway, particularly on the Somerset and Dorset, quite unsuitably hauling passenger trains, their real job was hauling the Towton to Brent heavy coal trains. And of course this was the ultimate development of the 4F. The model was built for me by Bob Lovell of Salisbury, and then two-railed by Barry with cab detail and brake gear. These two pretty little things, industrial engines, are, as many people will recognize, Bond Zone tanks. This one, which I've called Nora, after my wife, is more like the original form of the Bond Zone tanks. There's not much been done to alter that, but this one, we don't know who did it, but it's been turned into a half cab with extended underframe and wheelbase, and you've already had a look at the cab fittings which Barry Walls put in when he electrified it. So there we have two very useful little industrial tank engines. Well, I wonder if there's anybody who doesn't know the Stanier Black 5. These were introduced in 1934 by Stanier, and they were very much based on the Hall Great Western class of the 1920s. You can see the taper boiler, which is very much Swindon. There were 842 of this class built, and they were a success almost everywhere they went. I understand the Glasgow and South Western men didn't like them because they had no brakes, but they were still superb all-purpose engines. This model is based on a Dawson kit, very much modified by Bob Lovell, and again he did the brake gear and motoring, and he also did the cab detail. The Black 5. Peter Drummond, he introduced this engine, which was a development of the Jones goods, which I think most people know was the very first 460 engine in the British Isles. The engine would be found on the Highland Railway, of course, between Perth and Inverness and round there. The origin of this model isn't really known. John Hart had it as an LMS engine. It was bought from him by Arthur Dewar, but it was not fine scale, so I bought it from Arthur Dewar. Now, it's completely out of place on my line, but I like it, and I like it in that livery, and that's why I keep it and run it like that. Peter Drummond's Castle class engine, number 144, Blair Castle. This engine, of course, is part of the famous jazz service to Liverpool Street, the London Suburban Services. And it was Gresley's development of Ivett's design of 060 for a powerful engine that would accelerate trains quickly and could be maneuvered very easily and quickly. I'm very proud of this model. It was built for me, scratch built by Barry Walls, who spent so much time trying to improve other people's work. This he built from scratch. She's a lovely little engine and runs like a dream. N7. The J50-060 tank was introduced in 1922 by Sir Nigel Gresley, then Mr. Gresley, and their purpose was freight, short-haul freight and shunting. The original engines of this class had rectangular tanks, but the crew complained that it obscured their vision, and that's why they were shouldered and gave them this very distinctive appearance. The model was built for me by Alan Hardwick of Chesterfield. Now here's the famous Ginty. Nobody really knows who gave them that name. You've very seldom heard railwaymen refer to them, but they were a development of Fowler's 1924 design, and I can't remember how many of them were built, but it must have been something like 500. They would do anything from shunting, station pilot, and local passenger trains, quite heavy ones at times. This model was scratch built for me by Alan Hardwick of Chesterfield again, although I believe he did use parts of a Firmco kit. I'm not too sure about that. But this is one of the engines that was actually commissioned for Crewchester after I went to rail. It wasn't converted from clockwork. I'd have had a job getting a clockwork mechanism in that low boiler. It's not my intention to show you a lot of the rolling stock, in fact not any of it, except this. Some years ago, John Plumpton visited my layout and he brought a model of one of these brake vans, which I didn't recognize, and I very much admired it. It's built from sheet brass. It's a beautiful model. He turned up 4 years later with a parcel and he said a present for Crewchester, and it was this beautiful van. I find out since that there were 6 of these built, and they were marked to work between Copley Hill and Armley only, which is a matter of, 2 miles. And the reason they were built is that the Ginties, which brought the coal wagons down that incline, didn't have sufficient braking power to hold the wagons, and so they wanted a 40-ton vehicle to stop the trains running away and pushing the engine, presumably halfway into Leeds. There is one feature of this that's unusual. The lamp at the back actually lights up. I wasn't too sure whether to include this because it is a rather crude effort, but it is a bit of model railway history. These were produced by the Leeds Model Company in the interwar years, and they represent the Sentinel steam car. I can remember these running, for instance, between Finsbury Park and Edgware through Mill Hill the Hale. They weren't very successful, and I think their top speed was about 25 miles an hour. This one does 100. But that does show you the extent of our stud, 20 engines. And that brings me to the end of the program, which comes to you with best wishes of John Leach and myself, and the hope that you found something in it to enjoy. Goodbye.